visit to India. He's expected to meet Prime Minister Modi shortly to continue with the bilateral talks between India and Germany and further strengthen them. Also on the show, finally, we'll get you, will markets break the one-week jinx as earnings season for Q3 for corporate India kicks off today? All that and more on this edition of Morning Brief at 9. This is Morning Brief at 9. First up, let's bring you all the headlines that you're tracking for you this Monday morning. US President Donald Trump posts an image claiming to be the acting president of Venezuela after US captures Nicolás Maduro, even as Venezuela's Supreme Tribunal names Delcy Rodríguez interim leader. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz arrives in Ahmedabad to hold talks with Prime Minister Modi today. Visit to focus on expanding the India-Germany trade and defense ties and 25 years of strategic partnership amid global tensions. India is the world's fastest growing large economy, reiterates Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the Vibrant Gujarat Summit yesterday. Spain, Germany and other EU nations emerge as key growth markets for Indian exports amid trade pact talks. Australia raises visa risk levels for India and other South Asian nations, tightening security and scrutiny of international students. India calls for stronger global cooperation to help developing nations scale renewable energy without slowing growth. Ukraine's envoy hails Prime Minister Modi's global peace role as Kyiv seeks deeper economic and strategic ties with India. Back home, India tightens crypto regulations with live selfie geo-tracking and stricter anti-money laundering norms for exchanges. And finally, microblogging platform X removes thousands of posts and accounts after India flags obscene content linked to Grok AI. Let's begin first with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who said yesterday that India is the world's fastest growing large economy as he addressed the Vibrant Gujarat Summit during his two-day visit to the state of Gujarat. The Prime Minister arrived in Gujarat on Saturday and began his visit at the Somnath Temple, where he participated in the Somnath Swabhiman Parv. The event emphasized themes of cultural pride and national confidence, with Somnath's legacy deeply linked to India's civilizational history. Addressing industry leaders, investors and entrepreneurs, Prime Minister Modi said India continues to be the world's fastest growing large economy, driven by sustained reforms, infrastructure expansion and manufacturing growth. He stressed that Gujarat has played a pivotal role in this journey and has emerged as one of the country's strongest growth engines. Prime Minister Modi highlighted Gujarat's broad-based development, saying growth is visible across sectors from MSMEs to global financial institutions. He also said the state's business-friendly environment and policy stability have made it a preferred destination for both domestic and international investors. Pointing to India's technological progress, the Prime Minister said that over the last 11 years, India has become the world's largest consumer of mobile data and the second largest manufacturer of mobile phones globally.
साथियों, आज हर ग्लोबल एक्सपर्ट, ग्लोबल संस्थाएं भारत को लेकर बुलिश है। IMF भारत को ग्लोबल ग्रोथ का इंजन बताता है। S&P 18 इयर्स के बाद भारत की रेटिंग अपग्रेड करती है। फिच रेटिंग भारत की मैक्रो स्टेबिलिटी और फिस्कल क्रेडिबिलिटी इसकी प्रशंसा करती है। भारत पर दुनिया का ये भरोसा इसलिए है क्योंकि ग्रेट ग्लोबल अनसर्टेनिटी के बीच भारत में हम एक अभूतपूर्व सर्टेनिटी का दौर देख रहे हैं। आज भारत में पॉलिटिकल स्टेबिलिटी है, पॉलिसी में कंटिन्यूटी है, भारत में न्यू मिडिल क्लास का दायरा बढ़ रहा है, उनकी परचेजिंग पावर बढ़ रही है और इन फैक्टर्स ने भारत को असीम संभावनाओं का देश बना दिया है।
And staying with India's growth story, several European Union countries are emerging as stable and high-growth export destinations for Indian goods, even as global trade faces uncertainty. According to the Commerce Ministry data, Spain, Germany, Belgium and Poland are strengthening their position as key markets for Indian exports within the 27-nation European Union bloc. Among them, Spain has emerged as one of the fastest-growing European destinations for Indian products. Exports to Spain surged by more than 56% during the April to November period of this financial year, rising to $4.7 billion from about $3 billion in the same period last financial year. Spain's share in India's total exports increased to 2.4%, marking a gain of half a percentage point, the highest share increase among India's European trading partners during this period. Germany is next up, which continues to provide steady demand for Indian goods. Exports to Germany rose by over 9% to $7.5 billion during the 8-month period, up from $6.8 billion a year earlier. Now, with a 2.6% share in India's total exports and a positive share gain, Germany remains a stable and reliable European market for Indian exports. Meanwhile, India's exports to Belgium also inched higher, increasing from $4.2 billion to $4.4 billion during the same April to November period. Meanwhile, shipments to Poland grew by over 7.5% to $1.82 billion, reflecting expanding trade ties with Central and Eastern Europe. Now, these come at a time when India and the European Union are negotiating a free trade agreement. Officials say the pact could further boost bilateral trade even amid ongoing global economic challenges. Remember, in 2024-25, India's goods trade with EU stood at over $136 billion, marking the bloc India's largest trading partner. The EU accounts for around 17% of India's total exports. Sectors such as ready-made garments, pharmaceuticals, steel, petroleum products and electrical machinery are expected to become more competitive if the India-EU trade deal is finalized, strengthening India's export footprint across Europe. And from Europe, let's move on to Australia. And Australia has tightened its student visa scrutiny with 4 South Asian countries, including India, Nepal, Bangladesh and Bhutan, now placed under higher risk assessment, a move that could significantly slow visa processing for thousands of applicants from India and the other 3 nations. Now, according to a new report released this week, Australian authorities have raised the so-called evidence levels, or ELs, for several South Asian nations as part of a broader crackdown on what the government describes as fraudulent student visa applications. The change was made without a public announcement, but is expected to have a direct impact on international students from the region. A former Immigration Department Deputy Secretary Dr. Abul Rizvi told the Australian publication that these 4 countries together accounted for nearly 1/3 of all international student enrollments in Australia last year. Now, given the scale of the arrivals, the federal government moved to raise their evidence levels to the highest category, citing concerns over the integrity of visa applications. The Home Affairs spokesperson said the changes are aimed at ensuring that Australia's student visa system prioritizes genuine students seeking a quality education. The government believes the revised risk settings will help protect the credibility of Australia's international education sector while maintaining high academic standards. Officials also said the move is designed to ensure that students who come to Australia gain a meaningful educational experience, adding that the international education system and the student visa program currently have what they call the right settings in place. According to data from the Australian government's Department of Education, Australia hosted more than 8.33 lakh international students between Jan and October 2025. Of these, nearly 1.41 lakh were from India, making India the second largest source of international students in Australia. Now, during the Jan to October 2025 period, over 31,000 Indian students were new applicants, while more than 1.09 lakh were continuing their education in Australia. In comparison, the total number of Indian students in Australia during the full year of 2024 stood at around 1.38 lakh students. As Australia tightens its visa checks, the move is likely to spark concern among students and education consultants across South Asia, especially at a time when demand for overseas education remains strong, but scrutiny is clearly increasing. Meanwhile, Union Minister for New and Renewable Energy, Pralhad Joshi, has called for stronger international cooperation to help developing countries scale up renewable energy capacity without compromising their development goals. Now, speaking at the 16th Assembly of the International Renewable Energy Agency, or IRENA, in Abu Dhabi, Joshi said the global energy transition will require unprecedented levels of investment, technology sharing, and policy coordination. The minister noted that India alone is expected to require nearly $300 billion by 2030 to meet its clean energy targets. Now, highlighting India's clean energy ecosystem, Joshi said stable policies and transparent markets have made the country one of the world's most attractive destinations for renewable energy investment. Now, calling for enhanced international cooperation, the minister stressed that the need for technology transfer, access to low-cost finance, capacity building, and harmonization of global standards. He said these steps are essential to ensure that developing countries can expand renewable energy capacity without slowing economic growth or social development. Joshi said India is ready to share its experience, institutions, and technical expertise and work closely with all member countries, particularly least developed nations and small island developing states, to accelerate the global energy transition. He also emphasized that India's energy transition is not just about adding capacity, but about creating opportunities, improving lives, and building a shared sustainable future. Listen in.
One is, we are all agreeable that international cooperation is indispensable. One is, as already mentioned, finance sector, where in developing countries it is a huge problem. The capital cost is very huge. That's why affordable long-term finance and also multilateral development bank and risk mitigation system. This is the first thing. Second priority is technology. Technology for the not only generation, for the storage and for the transmission to also smart grid management, forecasting tools. These are the important things. And also, third thing is, because of the paucity of the time, one is supply chain. Supply chain has become a most crucial thing, especially this critical minerals, where it is needed. That is most important, along with other supply chains. Third is, more important, is capacity building. In every country, there should be a capacity building. And fourth is, energy transition must benefit the common people, community at large. And along with that, we should expand the access and the reliability and the continuity.
And from sustainability, let's move to sustainable steel. Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal has called for incentivizing precast and steel construction methods as a way to curb dust pollution caused by building activity in cities. Now, speaking at a meeting of businessmen and housing society office bearers in Mumbai, Piyush Goyal said construction-related dust remains a major contributor to urban pollution. He noted that globally, reinforced concrete mixtures are rarely used, with most countries opting for steel and precast structures instead. Acknowledging that such construction methods can be more expensive, Goyal said the government could explore concessions and incentives to encourage builders to shift away from conventional reinforced concrete construction. He said he plans to discuss the proposal with Maharashtra Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis. The Union Minister also suggested that reinforced concrete mixtures should be moved out of city limits to reduce pollution. Now, referring to his own parliamentary constituency in North Mumbai, Goyal said he had already removed several such mixtures and mixers from the area. Now, rather than imposing strict bans, Goyal argued that consensus building with builders would be more effective in promoting cleaner construction practices. He said encouraging the voluntary adoption of precast and steel methods could help reduce dust pollution during construction. And moving on now, Ukraine's ambassador to India has praised Prime Minister Narendra Modi's leadership, saying that the Prime Minister is playing an increasingly important global role in efforts to establish peace. The Ukrainian envoy said Prime Minister Modi's journey from a regional leader to a national one and now a global figure is clearly visible, including in Ukraine. He said Prime Minister Modi is among the few leaders from the global south who traveled to Ukraine in 2024 amid the ongoing war with Russia. The ambassador expressed confidence that achieving a sustainable and just peace in Ukraine would further strengthen ties between India and Ukraine, including at the state level with Gujarat. He said India's continued support for international peace efforts could create a strong foundation for long-term economic cooperation and development. The ambassador noted that Ukraine has been a partner country of the Vibrant Gujarat platform since 2023, describing it as both a mark of trust and a strategic opportunity to deepen economic engagement between the two countries. He said Ukrainian companies are actively engaging with Indian counterparts across sectors such as industry, education, agriculture, engineering, information technology, energy and logistics. The traditional areas of cooperation, including sunflower oil, grains and pharmaceuticals, remain strong. The Ukrainian envoy also invited Indian companies to participate in the upcoming Ukraine Recovery Conference and highlighted opportunities for industrial and technological cooperation, including in defense under the Make in India framework.
Honorable Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi ji, Honorable Chief Minister of the Gujarat, Shri Tripendra Patel, Deputy Chief Minister, Honorable Shri Harsh Sangwat ji, distinguished guests, distinguished Captain of the Industry. It's a great honor and pleasure for me to be back in Gujarat. It's for the third time I'm taking part in this global forum. And I would like to applaud your Honorable Prime Minister leadership, and which is the great example how from the global, from the regional leader you become the national leader, and now you are actually playing a very global role, including my country, to establish the peace. Now Gujarat is very well known around the world, and I would like to acknowledge that the presence role of the Shri Narendra Modi ji in shaping this development model and expand it to the entire country with the philosophy to create the country who will be the global leader and to take with the next couple years on a third part, on a third stage in a global, around the economy, around the world.
And finally, India has tightened oversight of cryptocurrency exchanges as part of a broader push to curb illegal activity in the digital asset market. The Financial Intelligence Unit, or FIU, has issued stringent new anti-money laundering and know your customer guidelines for crypto platforms, introducing mandatory liveness detection and geographical tracking during user onboarding. The updated rules classify crypto exchanges as virtual digital asset service providers, placing them under tighter compliance obligations. Under the new norms, exchanges can no longer rely on simple document uploads. Users will now be required to take a live selfie during software that confirms their physical presence, typically through eye movement or head motion, to prevent the use of static images or deepfakes. Exchanges also must capture detailed location data and the time of account creation, including latitude, longitude, IP address, date and timestamp. In addition, the penny drop method has been made mandatory, requiring a nominal 1 rupee transaction to verify that a bank account is active and belongs to the user. Now, beyond a PAN card, users must submit a second government-issued identity document such as Aadhaar, passport or voter ID, along with OTP verification of their mobile numbers and email addresses. The FIU, which operates under the Union Finance Ministry, has also taken a firm stance against tools that obscure the trail of crypto assets. The guidelines strongly discourage initial coin offerings and initial token offerings, citing their high risk and lack of clear economic justification. Now, all cryptocurrency exchanges operating in India are required to register with the FIU under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act and regularly report suspicious transactions as authorities step up efforts to combat money laundering and terror financing linked to digital assets. And with that, we will slip into a very short break. But coming up on the other side, Rohit Srivastava will be here to tell us what should we expect from the Q3 corporate earnings season that kicks off today, with heavyweights including TCS and HCL Tech likely to announce their Q3 results today. Remember, this comes at a time when markets have already witnessed 5 straight days of losses, and the opening this morning also seems to be fairly weak. That and more on the other side of the break. You're watching Morning Brief at 9.
जब 25 साल के प्रत्युष का किडनी का ऑपरेशन हुआ तो पॉलिसी बाजार की टीम ने हॉस्पिटल पहुंचकर 12 लाख का क्लेम अप्रूव करवाने में पूरी हेल्प की। पॉलिसी बाजार पर 1 करोड़ का हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस सिर्फ 550 रुपए महीने से शुरू।
With Skoda Supercare and growing network across 180 plus cities, you never drive alone.
Skoda.
इंडिया, ये तेरे लिए, तेरा नाम गूंजे, ये जिद है मेरी।
नए फैसलों के साथ तू आगे बढ़े, ये जिद है मेरी।
तेरे घर सपनों से बने, जिद छे मारी।
तेरे हर इरादे को हौसला मिले, जिद ए अमर।
जब तू बोले तो दुनिया सुने, पिड़ीवादम एनेतेयेदो।
मेरी कहानी से इंडिया की कामयाबी लिखूं, जिद है साडी। जब आप अपनी तरक्की की जिद पर अड़ते हो तो इंडिया की जीत होती है। इस जिद में आपके साथ गर्व से है टाटा कैपिटल। टाटा कैपिटल, जिद तरक्की की।
Welcome back. You're watching Morning Brief at 9. Let's bring you all the action from stock markets. The Lal Street has just opened a few minutes back, and it seems to be another day of some sell-off witnessed in both Sensex and Nifty. As things stand just 5 minutes into market open, both Sensex and Nifty losing about 1/3 of a percentage point to about 1/4 of a percentage point each. In fact, Nifty 50 is holding just about above the 25,600 odd levels, while the Sensex is squarely below the 83,500 mark as markets have just opened. Let's pull up the Nifty 50 heat map and try and see which are the sectors which are reeling under pain this morning. And the heat map suggests that the IT sector continues to be down in trade this morning. In fact, this is also the beginning of the Q3 earning calendar, and the IT big ticket companies including TCS and HCL Tech are expected to announce results today, followed by, of course, Infosys on the 14th of Jan, subsequently to be closed with Tech Mahindra. So the IT stocks not holding on very well this morning. TCS down about 1/4 of a percentage point. Infosys down about 0.85% or so. Another big Q3 result expected this week happens to be from Reliance Industries. In addition to that, you have the big ticket banks, HDFC Bank and ICICI Bank, both expected to give their Q3 report card to public this week. Well, Rohit Srivastav joins us this morning for all his expectations on what to expect from the earnings season as the Q3 earning calendar kicks off today. Rohit, thank you so much for your time. Straight off the back, the big ticket IT bellwether TCS expected to announce its Q3 results today. What should investors really be looking out for in the commentary?
So, when it comes to tech results and generally the earnings season is starting on expectations being extremely low. And therefore, there are odds that we will see a slightly better than expected earnings season. Okay. However, it's not going to be a flyaway, season either. We are just going to see the similar kind of improved growth numbers like we saw in the September quarter. Some segments doing better because of the impact of GST. But if we try to compare that with the market's reaction today morning, I think those are very, very disconnected. There's something very, very different happening at the market level, right? Which we may not be able to really reason with what you expect in the earnings.
Right. In fact, markets, like you mentioned, have slipped even further. In fact, both Sensex and Nifty down about 1/2 percentage point or so already in just the first 10 minutes of trading. So some of the factors that could potentially be at play here, Rohit, I don't know, I'm just making an educated guess here, but correct me if I'm wrong here. Of course, Q3 expectations, you're saying, may or may not really be a factor driving the market mood. But some flare-up in Iran leading to a spike in crude oil prices could potentially be one of the triggers which is keeping markets a little jittery. Add to that, of course, the gold hitting once again a record high last week, perhaps signaling more investors looking at moving to safer assets instead of equities at a volatile time like this. Do you think these could be some of the issues that could be weighing on investor sentiment right now?
So oil prices, they're not up that much. We're still below $60.
That's right.
In fact, you can see that one of the biggest losing segments of the market on your heat map would end up being energy, which includes Reliance Industries taking a hit. So that's why I said that a lot of the normal reasons may not be what is really affecting our market. What we've been seeing, though, is a consistent loss in momentum over the last several weeks, not just in India, but also in US markets. And the risk is, which one rolls over first. It's very clearly that our market is starting to roll. Now, while we can start guessing what are the reasons behind it, I can tell you one data point that I think will be interesting to your viewers. And that is on the Friday, this Friday, the last trading day, the data that we have. Foreign institutional investors held the largest short position in index futures on record. Okay, so this is a new data point.
Okay.
And this has happened within, barely a percentage point or two from the top. It has never happened before, because typically when markets go up, they tend to reduce their shorts and maybe go long a little bit.
Okay.
The only other time where they had a directional short bet on India was COVID. And at that point, SEBI came in the second week of March, I think around the 10th or 12th, and put a ban on further short sales. Now, this time around, it's not COVID, so there's not going to be any ban of that kind, which means they'll continue to be directionally negative on Indian markets. And the reason is what we are trying to guess. It could be something related to the trade deal. It could be something geopolitical or external that we are not able to see. There is this ruling which is now pushed to Wednesday on the US Supreme Court calls, but what will the US do after that is still to be seen. So many factors we can keep tracking. But definitely it's impacting Indian markets more than any other market as of now.
Absolutely. In fact, India continuing to perform more poorly as compared to its Asian peers this morning. But Rohit, on the point that you made of foreign investors really going short on India in the futures market right now, of course, the US trade deal apparently continues to be a concern. Is a bigger concern looming that US President Donald Trump may actually make good on his threat of raising tariff on India to 500%? Is that something which seems to be a real worry as well for investors, especially foreign investors who are now not just sitting on the edge, but literally exiting the Indian market?
So that statement was probably one of the starting points of the decline last week.
Yeah.
And the decline aggravating but we don't know whether that will actually go into force because we've seen, the talks go back and forth that yes, there is a deal and it's not happening, and it's all bending on the oil trade and the Russia trade. And to some extent, we can say that is why Reliance also has taken the biggest, weekly hit in a long period of time. So yes, there is some linkage there, but that all adds up with the other idea that, as long as we are even at a 50% tariff, the impact on Indian exports is going to be significant going forward, because so far there were a lot of order bookings through the festive season which were done in advance. And possibly it may not show up in numbers yet, but going forward, if we don't resolve this, it is going to show up in our numbers, somewhere. So those are the risks, I think, that people are feeling, that it's taken too long. It should have been resolved by now. And if it's not, then probably the markets, if I just look at, the setup on what has happened to the charts in the last 1 week, is that we've, weakened to a point where it will look like, and generally, seasonally, we've seen Jan, Feb, March actually be the weaker part of the year. And that means that between now and March, we wouldn't expect too much from the market. And, they be open to downside risks. So this is a quarter in which you're usually supposed to be a little more cautious. And the news flow is not helping.
Right, of course. But on the domestic front, Rohit, and I'm looking at auto stocks right now, and I'm looking at the weekly performance of auto stocks. In fact, consumer durables largely on Nifty 50. And I'm looking at auto stocks like Tata Motors, which is down 5%, Maruti Suzuki down about 3.5%, M&M down about 3.5%. Now, these three companies, specifically the auto pack, is completely dependent on domestic demand. And the kind of GST fillip which is given to sales of these brands should have potentially gotten investors to buy these stocks at lower valuation when we saw 5 days of losing. But despite that, even this morning, we are seeing a major sell-off in auto stocks. What could be the reason behind that? Because that potentially has very little to do with the India-US trade deal and overall the short position that FIIs are taking on the Indian market.
So like I said, this is a rub-off of something more beneath the surface. For example, even when we go back to the selling we saw in mid and small caps in probably November, December, a lot of it was being reasoned to the excessive, supply of paper that was coming in the market. Now, when those IPO applications actually become active, which is that when the allotments are made, people need to sell stocks and pay for the rest of the amount. And somewhere that selling had to show up, whether it's small caps or large caps. And so initially it was the broad market that sold off. The large caps were not really showing any impact. Now we are beginning to see the impact even on large caps. And that is why otherwise, since you're talking of the auto sector, that was one of the best. Autos, banking and metals, basically the interest rate sensitives on a 1-year basis have been the best performing segments of the market. But right now what we saw on Friday is that even banking broke the 20-day average and, gave us a sell signal on our weekly momentum indicators. So despite all the positivity, we actually seeing weakening in these important or, best performing sectors.
Rohit, my final question to you, what is likely to happen next? Because if the selling continues, then what are the lows that we are potentially looking at as far as levels on Sensex and Nifty go?
So I'll put it in different time periods. In the very short term, we are already starting to look oversold, but I will, keep room for another 200-300 points down from where we are right now before we get our first bounce. Now, markets, when they are weak also, they get very, very sharp rallies. So whenever it does bounce, 300-400 point bounces are normal. However, between now and March, like I said earlier, we anticipate that the bias will be slightly towards weakening and probably things improve only after March. Between now and then, hopefully we do get something on the trade side, and then we'll also know what the impact of the budget by the month end is going to be. So all of that will then start getting priced in. So yeah, look at it being more of a trading market. Investors may probably increase cash levels again, as and when you get those bounces in the market, so that you can look at opportunities down the line. But there could also be a very, very stock specific approach, because the truth here is that a lot of stocks have fallen so much that some of them are actually attractive on valuations, and that is where we were focused on for the last few months. So it could be a very stock specific market in which the Nifty really doesn't do much. It continues to gyrate up and down with a slight downward bias between now and March. So there may be trading opportunities on the index side. But as investors, we would probably be very stock specific in our approach and keep some cash to be able to buy into good opportunities.
Right, Rohit Srivastav there. Thank you so much for your time this morning and all the input that you've given to investors out there. For investors, this looks like a stock-specific rally is the word coming in from Rohit Srivastav. And of course, for traders, perhaps index could be something that traders would continue to trade in. Well, thank you so much for your time this morning, Rohit. Well, moving on now. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is in India and is expected to meet Prime Minister Modi today to continue India's bilateral trade talks between Germany and India. Now, remember, this is German Chancellor's first trip to Asia and his first trip to India ever since he became the Chancellor of Germany last year. Remember, Merz and Modi are expected to further talk on expanding the $33.4 billion bilateral trade that India and Germany enjoy. But as part of this trade, remember, Germany still maintains a trade surplus with India. Meanwhile, India's exports of textiles, pharmaceuticals, auto components to Germany have been holding in good stead. Now, both Friedrich Merz and Prime Minister Modi's bilateral talks are expected to be conducted on semiconductors and defense deals in the making between India and Germany. Do remember, 2025 last year was the year when India and Germany celebrated the 25th year of strategic partnership. Germany continues to be Europe's largest economy, and India is the world's fastest growing economy, something that Prime Minister Modi reiterated yesterday at the Vibrant Gujarat Summit. Meanwhile, both countries are also uniquely dealing with their respective tensions with the United States. Now, tensions with US could potentially also be on agenda, where India is dealing with the 50% US tariff. Meanwhile, Europe is confronting US on the Greenland threat. Now, the India-EU free trade agreement talks have also been going on for a while now. Remember, Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal met EU Trade Commissioner Maros Sefcovic just last week. And something that continues to be a thorny issue between India and EU is EU's carbon tax on India's steel exports, which is a worry for the Indian industry as well as the government. Can this meeting, the bilateral trade meeting between Prime Minister Modi and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, result not just in upping bilateral trade, but also getting rid of the thorny issues between the India-EU FTA? Well, Jayant Das Gupta, former ambassador to WTO, joins us this morning on the broadcast. Thank you so much, Mr. Das Gupta. Just help us put this in perspective. We understand that Germany is a solid trading partner as far as India's trade goes, not just with EU, but the rest of the world. But Friedrich Merz's visit to India, hopefully looking at pushing defense deals and semiconductor deals. Could this also be an opportunity for India to try and influence Friedrich Merz on the very, very contentious carbon tax issue, which India and EU continue to grapple with?
As far as Chancellor Merz's tour is concerned, I think there would be a few items on the agenda already. One of them is sewing up the submarine deal. India has a number of Russian submarines, 6 submarines which are more recent of French origin. But the Germans are very keen to sign a deal with India on submarines for joint production and for transfer of technology also. So that, I think, will figure quite prominently on the agenda. Apart from that, there would be semiconductor, production there could be talks on the movement of medical professionals, because Germany is currently facing a shortage of many categories of medical professionals, and India could provide professionals and fill up that gap. But there would be this issue of mutual recognition of the degrees or qualifications. So that is something which can be taken forward. Apart from that, there would be this cooperation discussion on critical minerals. India has 6% of the world's critical minerals, but of course the concentration is quite low. But Germany is interested in signing a deal with India to jointly exploit the critical minerals. So that is another area. And finally, India and Germany are, there is a large number of Indian students who are going to Germany every year to study STEM, mainly science, technology, and engineering subjects. And they are going on to do PhDs, etc. So that is another area where further cooperation could lead to providing services after their qualification through a bilateral deal. Post work visa, for instance, post qualification visa, for instance, there is a limitation to that, but that could be extended. So these are some of the areas in which there would be talks. As far as the CBAM issues, the carbon border adjustment measures, which mainly affects the steel industry and our steel exports to the EU, which are about $7 billion per annum, that is concerned. That is an EU regulation, and Germany could promise to help, but I don't think it would have the final say in the matter, because it is decided by all the 27 countries of the EU together.
Right. So potentially no real further movement on India-EU FTA talks expected, because this continues to be a bilateral trade talk. And remember, EU is a 27-member nation. Meanwhile, what about geopolitics? Do you think this is the right forum, Ambassador Das Gupta, to also discuss geopolitics, especially at a time when we are seeing that India's import of Russian oil has reduced? This was again a thorny issue with all of Europe, including Germany, where India was processing that Russian crude and exporting it back to EU. Now that we understand has reduced, if not stopped completely. But is that something, India's import of Russian oil, is that something that could feature in the bilateral engagement between Prime Minister Modi and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz?
Germany buys a lot of Russian gas, and it is, of course, reducing its imports of gas very, robustly. But there could be this discussion on imports of Russian oil and gas, because India is going to be affected much more severely than Germany at the moment. But it is again an EU decision which will ultimately prevail. As far as other geopolitical issues are concerned, there would be two which would figure. One of them is, of course, the Trump tariffs on India as well as the EU, which are affecting exports. And Germany being the largest exporter of the European Union and perhaps the third largest exporter in the world, with a very sizable surplus in trade in goods, Germany is affected very badly, and its industry has suffered. And if I'm not wrong, 3 quarters ago, Germany actually had a negative growth in its GDP. So Germany again is very concerned about the trade upheaval, the tariff issue, and it may want to exchange views on that. The last point on which Germany is quite concerned is the current scenario in Denmark and President Trump's threat to take over Greenland.
Yes.
And Denmark being a part of NATO and Germany being the largest contributor to NATO in Europe,
Yes.
Germany is concerned because today it could be Greenland, tomorrow it could be some other part of some other country.
Right.
So the Europeans are trying to remain united, put up a strong front, and tell President Trump that this is simply not on. And they would like to have the support of other countries, democratic countries like India, to press this thing forward. Just yesterday, the German finance minister, before leaving for Washington to attend a G7 finance ministers meeting, he said that the US is as much subject to international law as any other country.
Absolutely.
And he mentioned it in the context of President Trump's threat to take over Greenland.
Right. All right. So a lot to look forward to. Well, we don't know how much of this is actually going to make it to the bilateral talks between Prime Minister Modi and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz. But thank you so much for your input on this story. We will continue to track this story all day today. But for now, thank you so much, Ambassador Das Gupta. With that, we will slip into a very short break. A lot more coming up from around the world after this short break.
जब विकास जी के लिवर का ऑपरेशन हुआ तो पॉलिसी बाजार की टीम ने हॉस्पिटल पहुंचकर 50 लाख रुपए का क्लेम अप्रूव करवाने में पूरी हेल्प की। पॉलिसी बाजार पर 1 करोड़ का हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस सिर्फ 550 रुपए महीने से शुरू।
डेस्टिनेशन वेडिंग के लिए बजट रोते थे, पर पिक्स कितनी अच्छी आई है।
बहुत क्यूट लग रही हो।
ऑब्वियो, अपने दम पे शादी करने का ग्लो।
इनकी जिद ने किया डेस्टिनेशन वेडिंग का सपना सच अपने दम पर, टाटा कैपिटल पर्सनल लोन्स के साथ।
Welcome back. You're watching Morning Brief at 9. Now, when geopolitics meets social media, reality can get quite creative. US President Donald Trump posted an image on his social platform, Truth Social, this morning, portraying himself as what he calls the acting president of Venezuela, a move that drew obvious attention amid ongoing political turmoil in the Latin American nation. The unusual social media post appears to reference events earlier this month when US forces carried out military strikes in Venezuela and captured President Nicolás Maduro and his wife. The operation was part of a larger US intervention dubbed Operation Absolute Resolve that led to Maduro's detention and transfer to New York to face federal charges. Now, following the operation on Jan 3rd, Delcy Rodríguez, formerly the Venezuelan vice president, was sworn in as the interim president by the country's Supreme Tribunal of Justice. And meanwhile, we are getting live visuals of that very important visit by German Chancellor Friedrich Merz here in India. He is visiting the Sabarmati Ashram, standing right next to Prime Minister Narendra Modi and paying his respects there. Well, remember, Friedrich Merz is on his first visit to Asia and begins his journey into Asia with India. And these are visuals that have come in just right now of Friedrich Merz with Prime Minister Modi there visiting Mahatma Gandhi's ashram as well. Well, these are visuals a little delayed, I believe, which are coming in right now. And Friedrich Merz, they're really looking at the spinning wheel and signing the visitor's diary. Remember, India's textile exports to Germany is one of the sectors that is likely to be on focus to further strengthen bilateral trade between India and Germany. Meanwhile, Germany continues to enjoy a trade surplus with India on the overall bilateral trade between the two countries at about $33.4 billion in FY 24-25. Prime Minister Modi and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz are expected to conduct bilateral talks, and these talks are likely to focus on co-developing semiconductors as well as stitching up defense deals. Remember, German submarines is something that could be on agenda as part of those defense deals that India wants to stitch up with Germany, and Germany wants to sell its defense capabilities to India. But of course, as we've seen in the past, one of the contentious issues there could be the transfer of technology, and that is something that we will have to wait for the final blueprint of the bilateral talks to emerge to know what comes out of them. Meanwhile, other geopolitical issues also continue to be on the table. Remember, Europe and India both dealing with different sets of challenges with respect to the United States. India continues to face the steep 50% tariff on US. Meanwhile, US has also hinted more than obviously that it wants to perhaps potentially further increase tariffs on India to as high as 500% if India continues to buy Russian oil. Meanwhile, Europe is also dealing with its own set of challenges with the US, one among them being the thorny issue of Greenland. Well, we don't know how many of the geopolitical issues would be as part of the bilateral trade talk between the German Chancellor and the Indian Prime Minister. Remember, there are also going to be business delegations. There is a large business delegation which has traveled with Friedrich Merz, which is expected to meet a high-level Indian business delegation as well. So trade definitely likely to be on the table as far as the bilateral talks go. How much of geopolitics are going to be on talks as far as the agenda for the bilateral goes is something that we don't have news on right now. But of course, this is a story that we will continue to track all day long today. And those are visuals coming in of Friedrich Merz with Prime Minister Modi in Gujarat. And of course, that is a big story that we will continue to track. India's bilateral trade talks with Germany happen to be on agenda today. And with that, we will slip into another short break, but a lot more coming up on the other side. Stay tuned.